Just before it invaded Ukraine, Russia was the European Union's top supplier of key components of Europe's energy mix: natural gas, oil, and solid fossil fuels. In 2019, Russia was the world's second largest exporter of crude oil, and it amassed a total of $123 billion in its economy that year. But the same cannot be said now, as many EU states have taken certain steps against Russia due to its invasion of Ukraine. Hence, Russia's economy is highly threatened. In today's video, we look at the situation Russia finds itself in and the problems it might face in the energy sector. Let's get right in. Where it all began. Before delving into the topic, you must know how Russia got its title as the second largest crude exporter and where it all began. Back when the Soviet Union were in power, they usurped many things and dominated the energy sector. The amount of oil and gas that the Soviet Union had in their hands made them extremely powerful. Russia, its successor, is taking the same route as its predecessor did. Russia inherited every drop of oil and gas the Soviet Union ever had. Right now, the country has even taken a top spot as the world's #1 enemy. And the fact that they are controlling a massive amount of oil and gas makes things even worse. Russia started dominating the energy sector just like its ancestor because it had inherited a large portion of the Union's pipelines and natural oil and gas fields. Many analysts have referred to Russia as an oil company with a president who is a CEO. The late U.S. Senator John McCain called the country a gas station masquerading as a country. This proves that Russia's superiority and global dominance have been rooted in its oil and gas supply since immemorial. In 2021, Russia's crude and condensate supply totaled about 10.5 million barrels daily. When estimated, this was taking up 14% of the world's total supply. Would you imagine that? One country's oil supply takes up 14 of the world's total oil output. That's crazy amazing if you ask me. It gets more interesting from here. You see, not only does Russia have a massive oil supply, but they also have such amounts of gas. With the United States at the #1 position, Russia takes second place in owning the country's largest gas reserves. Not only that, but it's also the world's largest gas exporter. The largest portion of its oil and gas supply is mostly sold to Europe and China, with Europe being Russia's main customer. The European Union depends on Russian gas for 40% of its consumption and 45% of its imports. This can only mean that as much as Europe depends on Russia's energy supply, Russia also relies heavily on Europe's money, and this is where the real problems begin. Russia's over-reliance on the energy sector. One key problem Russia has is that it's too dependent on its oil and gas, and this only builds up more problems for Putin. As a country, Russia is blessed with so many resources, but it has yet to take the time to diversify its economy properly, like the Saudi royals did when they hit the oil jackpot. Instead, Russia has built an economy vested in the energy sector, given that they have a gazillion energy products. This has created a situation where the country's over-reliance on fossil fuel exports puts its GDP and even its domestic spending at a very big risk. Each time oil prices drop or its exporters lose their market share, Russia's economy suffers a great deal. When you look at the country's revenue, oil and gas take up about 60% of its exports and 45% of its budget revenues. Research from Statistica shows that between the first quarter of 2017 and the second quarter of 2020, Russia's hydrocarbon energy has ranged from 15% to 25% of the country's GDP. All of this is close to the amount exported to Europe and the rest sold to Asia. Its over-reliance on just one sector is damaging Russia and has only worsened to the point where its over-reliance might be the catalyst to Russia's final collapse. A country's overdependence on the oil and gas sector is that oil prices are volatile. For example, the reduction in oil prices during most of 2010 affected Russia's oil revenues, damaging the country's budgets and plans. Russia's refusal to get innovative. Now, not only is the oil-based economic climate a problem for Russia, but a larger portion of its energy and oil crisis arises from its refusal to get innovative. Despite the amount of money the country has made from selling oil and energy production, Russia still needs to be smart enough to innovate and invest in other sectors. As a result, there were only so many incentives for companies to create new fields today. Russian oil production relies on inadequate water pressure extraction in Soviet legacy reserves. For a country as big as it is, Russia is still using methods it inherited back in the Soviet era. So why did a country as powerful as Russia refuse to use technological innovations to increase its production and update its income? We do wonder. 2/3 of the country's new reserves have unconventional oil that needs new technology and requires a larger capital than is usually used to extract it. So you see, this is a very big problem for Russia, and it's one of the reasons its oil production is so slow compared to its competitors. All of this is not even supposed to be a problem in the first place, as countries with similar large resources like Russia do and are also capable of making use of them. But these countries sign contracts with foreign companies and get their extraction done in such cases. Everyone is happy. But the reverse is the case for Russia. Due to their tight tax rate regulations and a distrustful attitude toward foreign oil companies, especially from the West, their ability to grow in the energy sector has always been difficult. The EU sanctions. Russia's 2014 military invasion of Ukraine had its effects, one of which is the sanctions the United States imposed on them. This, of course, affected their oil revenues. Russia's move to challenge Ukraine was probably its biggest mistake. Unless you're not living on Earth with the rest of us, you should know about Russia's invasion of Ukraine, or as Putin likes to say, his military exercise. Anyways, there is a deeper story to the war. Out of all 15 states or thereabouts in the Soviet Union, other than Russia, Ukraine was the one country that had a strong footing. It has a large population, and the icing on the cake is that, just like Russia, Ukraine also inherited energy infrastructures. However, Russia requires some of Ukraine's pipelines to transport its oil and gas supplies, and at some point, Russia had pending fees which it had yet to pay for making use of Ukraine's pipelines. In its regular style, Russia began taking harsh measures as it dominates the oil and gas sector. In previous years like 2006, 2009, and 2014, it had cut the gas supply to Ukraine and demanded that Ukraine pay 3 times the normal amount for gas supply. All of this, including Russia's invasion of Ukraine, increased the European Union's hate for Russia. This made the EU take the body step to sanction everything that comes from Russia to reduce Russia's power in the energy sector, as Putin was misusing his power so much. Member states of the EU began moving to phase out Russian oil and gas, which just put Putin's dear country in big trouble. Even though Europe may be affected too, Russia has it worse. At some point, Russia's revenues will reduce drastically, and it may be forced to depend on Asian markets, since they are the only ones still purchasing energy supplies, but at a discounted rate. It will all be a big loss for Russia at this point. With all that's happening now, much like its predecessor, Russia is leaning towards a dead end. A time will come when the country is completely boycotted, leaving them with nothing. So when Russia is barely trying to survive, remember that it all began with the energy and oil crisis. Thanks so much for watching. We kindly invite you to share this video and subscribe to the channel. Also, share your thoughts in the comment section below. Until next time.